At dawn's first pale light, Clara Montoya stood beside the dry well, her fingers brushing empty buckets as she stared at the cracked earth. The Montoya ranch, once proud and green, lay parched beneath a merciless sun. Corn stalks leaned brittle, and hushed cattle waited with hollow eyes. Clara's mother, Maria, pressed a trembling hand to her daughter's shoulder. "We're days from losing everything," she whispered. Debt collectors had begun circling like vultures, their cruel grins promising ruin. Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. Word had spread that the cattle baron, Victor Harrow, demanded a settlement no mortal ranch could meet. Only one bargain remained. Clara must marry his son, James Harrow, to save her family's land. Clara arose before the first chirp of meadowlarks to prepare her father, Tomas, for the grim arrangement. He'd press a cold letter into her hands. "My son will wed your daughter at sunrise. Accept or forfeit your claim." His voice cracked. Clara's heart ached as she packed a small bag, one change of linen, her mother's shawl, and a locket from her late brother. The night had been filled with prayers, silent and desperate. When the sky deepened to violet, Clara stood at the fence line, wearing a simple white cotton dress, stitched by her own hands, braided hair pinned with moss rose blossoms. Dawn approached, and with it, her last hope. At sunrise, a hush fell over the Montoya yard. Dust swirled in gold shafts of sun as a black wheeled carriage creaked into view. James Harrow, the cattle baron's only heir, stepped down. His tailored coat and polished boots seemed out of place amid peeling fences and sunbaked fields. Rumor said James was cold as steel. Only his father's scorn kept emotion at bay. He offered Clara a stiff nod, his blue eyes unreadable. No words passed between them as a makeshift altar, 2 hitching rails, hosted the ceremony. Clara's cheeks burned as the town pastor intoned vows tested by one-sided desperation. Rachel, the pastor's wife, dabbed her handkerchief at Clara's back. When the brief ritual concluded, Clara and James were legally bound, their hearts distant as dawn's chill. The small hayloft above the Montoya stable served as their bridal chamber, dimly lit by a single lantern. Clara stepped inside, her dress rustling, and James followed without a word. The loft was modest. A handful of straw bales, a patchwork quilt, and a rough wooden stool. Dust motes drifted in the lantern's golden glow. Clara's throat tightened. She dared not meet James's gaze. When he eased the lantern onto a crate and turned away to lean against a wall, Clara realized their marriage was a transaction in silk and promises, not love. Silence grew thick between them. She perched on the edge of the straw bed, skirt fanning around her. He kept his back to her, shoulders rigid. Not a single word broke the hush. Clara's mind swirled with conflicting emotions. Relief that her family's claim was safe, panic at the chasm between her and the stranger, and loneliness so deep it made her chest tighten. She thought of her parents, who had traded their only child for dust and hope. She longed for home, but knew that nothing would feel the same. The door groaned softly as a breeze stirred the lantern's flame. Clara made a cautious step forward. "James," she ventured. "Are you?" His back remained still. She swallowed. Before she could continue, the lantern flickered low. In that wavering glow, Clara glimpsed his profile, sharp jaw, eyes cast downward. Something in his posture suggested regret, not disdain. A sudden soft creak came from the doorway. Clara's head snapped toward the sound. Outside, the dark corridor lay empty, but the hush felt more ominous. Her pulse raced as she crept to the door. Through the narrow crack, she saw a lone figure standing at the loft's entrance, cloaked beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The stranger's presence was like a cold breath on her neck. Clara froze, heart pounding. She glanced back at James, whose tense stillness mirrored her own shock. In that moment, time slowed. The outcast bride and the reluctant groom stood side by side, shadows flickering across their faces, as the unknown watcher held its breath in the dim barn rafters. Clara's voice trembled. "Who's there?" No answer came, only the muted scrape of wood. The figure did not move, only watched. Clara's courage wavered, but she forced steadiness into her tone. "Show yourself." The stranger stepped forward, hat brim brushing the lantern's light. A booted foot appeared, then a hand grasping a worn leather slip. James's head snapped around, his eyes widening as the stranger produced a tattered note. Clara's breath hitched. She moved instinctively to stand before him, ready to defend her fragile new reality. The stranger's hat tipped back, revealing a young face lined with worry. Clara's heart skipped as she recognized the messenger, Rosa, her childhood friend and neighbor's daughter. "Clara," Rosa whispered, voice thick with urgency, "you must know, your family's freedom depends on more than this marriage. Secrets hidden in Harrow's ledger could destroy more than hearts." James stiffened, stepping between Clara and Rosa. In the barn's hush, the weight of Rosa's words lingered. Clara glanced at James, and for the first time sensed a flicker of shared purpose in his eyes. In that suspended moment, Clara realized that her first night as Mrs. Harrow was not an end, but the beginning of a journey neither she nor James had chosen. But both would be forced to navigate together. As the lantern cast dancing shadows over rope and leather, a new chapter opened, one filled with fragile alliances, buried loyalties, and the unspoken promise that the dust of dawn had only settled briefly before the true trials began. Outside, the wind carried distant hoofbeats and the faint crack of twigs. Another figure approached the barn, moving quickly in the second lantern's glow, intent on revealing a secret that could either bind Clara and James together or tear them apart forever. Clara stepped down from the rattling carriage at the threshold of the Harrow Ranch house, her boots stirring golden dust along the wide flagstones. Before her, the great adobe walls gleamed under fading afternoon light, their smooth surfaces patched with pale, homemade plaster that spoke of generations of wealth. Overhead, a broad veranda ran the length of the house, its carved supports casting lacy shadows on the ground. Clara's heart tightened as she took in the polished oak doors and brass knob windows. Here, every corner seemed to declare privilege she could never claim, yet this place now held the fate of her family. Inside, the foyer stretched into a high-ceilinged hall lined with oil paintings of stern ancestors. Clara's modest cotton dress felt almost indecent amid thick Persian rugs and the gleam of silver pitchers on marble-topped tables. A hush greeted her steps, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle. Servants in crisp vests and long skirts passed without remark, their faces polite yet distant. Clara felt as though she carried a bright ribbon of hope in one hand and a heavy stone of guilt in the other, each step echoing the impossible bargain she had made. Later, as dusk draped the veranda in cool shadows, James Harrow appeared in the glow of a torchlight lantern. His tailored coat brushed the floorboards, his posture tense. He carried a small wooden box, its surface worn smooth by careful carving. Kneeling before Clara, he opened it to reveal a tiny bird, its wings poised for flight. The delicate carving was rough around the edges, but unmistakably crafted with care. "I thought this might be better than silence," he offered, voice low but earnest. Clara's throat tightened as she accepted the token, an emblem of his inner conflict, a quiet gesture that pierced the walls between them. Holding the wooden bird close, Clara felt a spark of connection. James had chosen to share something personal, however small a gift. The lantern's flame flickered across his features, softening the angles of his face, revealing vulnerability where rumor had claimed only hardness. For a breath, Clara allowed herself to imagine warmth in this arrangement, a possibility beyond duty and desperation. Yet as night deepened, the distant clang of a bell and the hush of the servants reminded her that appearances and alliances ruled here, and sentiment had little currency in Victor Harrow's world. By mid-morning, Clara watched from a shaded corner as Victor Harrow, the patriarch, strode on the veranda in pressed trousers and a BOLO tie glinting like a warning. He stood beside James with a rigid nod, his gaze sweeping the courtyard as though ranking the value of every grain of earth. In a voice crisp with authority, he demanded updates on cattle markets and regional troubles. James answered with polite deference, But Clara noticed the hesitation in his tone, an echo of the private moment they had shared. Victor's eyes flicked to where Clara stood framed by the veranda's pillars. He inclined his head once, acknowledging her presence as one would approve a tool, not a daughter-in-law. Later, as the household settled for midday rest, Clara wandered the broad corridors that overlooked rolling pastures. Curtains of muted green framed views of distant hills, and the air smelled of newly cut timber. In an unguarded moment, she overheard voices behind a closed door. Leaning forward, she caught Victor's low, commanding tone. "This merger must protect our interests. The Montoya claim cannot jeopardize Harrow Holdings. If that drought returns, we need leverage." James's voice quavered as he replied, "Father, Clara's family land was nearly lost once." You'll do as you're told," Victor cut in, voice trimmed with steel. Clara shivered as she realized her family's fate rested in the balance of these whispered negotiations. Her heart pounding, Clara backed away, mind racing with fear and indignation. The Harrow Ranch, so lavish and immovable, loomed now as a trap, where alliances were bargains and compassion amounted to weakness. The golden dust that had settled on the veranda in Dawn's promise now felt like chains across her soul. Determined to reclaim a sense of agency, she resolved to learn more of her new surroundings, convinced that knowledge might offer safety, and perhaps a path to true understanding. Clara's exploration led her upstairs to a long gallery lit by flickering sconces. Portraits of Harrow forefathers glared down from the walls, but her attention shifted to a carved oil-brush desk tucked beneath a mullioned window. Beside it stood a sturdy bureau, its center drawer secured by an ornate iron lock. Heart fluttering, Clara ran her fingers over the lock's cold surface, intrigued by the promise of secrets within. No key lay in sight. She glanced around. The corridor was empty and silent except for the soft drip of lantern oil. Recalling a slender hairpin tucked into her coil braid, Clara thought of the nights her mother taught her gentle jigs for picking stubborn latches. With trembling resolve, she inserted the pin into the lock's narrow keyhole. The tension in her fingers grew as she wiggled the makeshift tool. Click! The drawer parted with a sudden sigh. Inside lay folded sheets of parchment, yellowed and brittle at the edges. Clara's pulse thundered as she retrieved the papers with shaking hands. Under flickering light, she smoothed the note across the desk. "My son, remember the dream you left behind when you set your hand to this ranch. Never let their fortunes dim your own hopes." The handwriting was small, neat, likely penned by a woman. A second line, barely legible, read, "Seek the schoolhouse, not the boardroom." The words trembled on the page, hinting at James's concealed past and unfulfilled aspirations. Clara's breath caught. She had witnessed only duty in his posture, yet here lay something deeper. Ambition sacrificed, dreams buried beneath centuries of cattle and contracts. As Clara held the note close, the flickering sconce cast trembling shadows around the corridor. Her heart pounded with questions. Who had written this plea, and why had James hidden it? What dreams had he abandoned for this gilded cage? The locked drawer had safeguarded more than family secrets. It had sheltered the fragile heartbeat of a man she scarcely knew. Clara leaned against the bureau, mind racing with possibilities that swelled between hope and dread. In that suspended moment, the Montoya daughter felt her world shift beneath her feet, tore between fear for her family and curiosity about a husband who offered a wooden bird as a symbol of hope. At the end of the corridor, the hush broke with the soft click of a closing door. Clara's eyes darted toward it as footsteps approached. She crammed the note into her bodice pocket and snapped the drawer shut, her heart thudding like a freight hoof. Was it James returning to retrieve his hidden plea? Or Victor, seeking to guard the family's ledger of obligations? The grand house seemed to hold its breath, waiting to reveal which fate would come next. Clara took a steadying breath, steeling herself. The locked drawer had opened more than parchment. It had unlocked a new mystery in the Harrow household. And now, her next choices would determine whether that secret would bring understanding or deeper peril. As Clara slid the note into her bodice, the distant echo of hoofbeats trundled across the veranda, urgent, insistent, and drawing ever nearer, promising a revelation that might reshape her fragile marriage and the destiny of two families forever. Clara returned to the study when the sun dipped low, painting the ranch house in bruised gold. The study's heavy drapes were drawn against the afternoon glare, and a dozen flickering candles cast uncertain shadows against bookshelves hewn from local oak. Clara sank into a high-backed leather chair, the note, a scrap of brittle parchment, clutched in her trembling hand. The hush in the room felt sacred, as though the house itself held its breath. She smoothed the paper against her knee and studied the handwriting. Each curl and loop of ink had been penned in a hurried hand, invisible hesitation hidden in each line. When the dawn broke over the cottonwoods, you let the music die for duty's sake. Never forget the song you once held in your heart. Clara's pulse galloped as she deciphered the words, each one a whisper of a man she barely knew. The signature was simply A, but the message was unmistakable. James Harrow had once cherished music. Her fingers trembled as she folded the note. A single breath, half sigh, half prayer, escaped her lips. She pictured James as the aloof scion of a cattle empire, a man born to inherit fences and herds, not melodies. Yet this note hinted at a private world where his soul had danced to harmonica strains. Clara felt a surge of empathy and a fresh pang of curiosity. Beneath that polished facade lay an unplayed tune yearning to be heard. She slipped from the chair and crossed to the wide window overlooking the veranda. The sky bled red over pastures where their fate had been sealed. Clara closed her eyes, recalling the distant hoofbeats that had heralded Rose's warning. Now, in this room thick with candle smoke and silent expectation, Clara wondered how deep the divide between her duty and James's buried passion truly ran. Soft footsteps on the veranda drew her attention. She crossed the polished floorboards, her hem whispering against the rug, and stepped out into the dying light. James stood alone at the rail, the carved wooden bird perched on the post beside him. His shoulders drooped, and the last sunrays caught the gold flecks in his eyes. Clara joined him, breath plucking at her throat. "I read your note," she said quietly, voice thick with wonder. She held out the paper. James's hand trembled as he took it, his knuckles whitening. Under his furrowed brow, sorrow bloomed like a dark rose. "You don't know how long I've carried those words," he said at last, voice low and raw. "My father insisted I forget that dream." Clara's heart ached at the confession. "A harmonica," she said, nodding toward his coat pocket. Sure enough, a leather case peeked from within. James's eyes flickered to it. "I haven't touched it in years," he admitted. "Each time I raise it to my lips, I hear my father's voice telling me it's frivolous." Pain and regret lanced through his tone. Clara felt the weight of his sacrifice, a man giving up joy to uphold a legacy that threatened to crush both of them. James paused, then removed the case with deliberate reverence. He handed it to Clara, a gift of trust. "Would you believe me if I said I miss it?" he asked. Clara opened the case, revealing a weather harmonica etched with James's initials. She traced the metal with a gentle fingertip. His music was a song I'd never heard. Yet echoed my own silence, she whispered, recalling her own suppressed hopes for her family's survival. She looked up to find James's gaze steady on her, vulnerability shining through. He lifted the harmonica and placed it to his lips. The first notes were fumbling, halting, a muted sob of sound that quivered in the hush. Clara closed her eyes, letting the hesitant melody wash over her. Sunlight faded, leaving only the lamplight and the strains of a dream reborn. By the time James set the harmonica aside, both of them were breathing unevenly, hearts laid bare. But even as a fragile warmth unfurled between them, darkness crept back inside. Clara sensed footsteps on the veranda behind the study. She stepped away from James as two of Victor Harrow's men appeared, their silhouettes rigid under the torchlight. The larger man, his hat tipped low, spoke in a tone as cold as iron. "Mrs. Harrow, your father wishes to remind you of your obligation. The Montoya claim must solidify before next week, or arrangements will change. Clara stiffened. You have my family's word, she replied, voice shaking. The man's lips curved in a grim smile. We doubt it. At dawn, new papers will be drawn. Best to accept what you're given. With that, the men turned and strode away, their boots clacking like gavel strikes on the veranda floor. Clara watched them disappear, her mind whirling as disappointment and anger collided. James closed the study door with an echoing thud. The candle flames danced in warning. He moved to her side, lowering his voice. I'm sorry, he said, voice heavy. My father, the land dispute is a threat to both our families. I never wanted this. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. I only wanted a chance to be more than a pawn, she whispered. He wrapped his fingers around hers, his touch a desperate anchor. You deserve more than this. His words struck her with the force of promise. But outside, the ranch remained a fortress of debt and power. Clara swallowed her fear. If your father presses this, my parents lose a home they spent their lives building. She swallowed again, remembering her father's haunted eyes when he handed her the marriage decree. James's jaw clenched. I'll fight him, he vowed. We'll salvage your family's claim, then I'll reclaim my own life too. Clara met his gaze, her chest swelling with both hope and doubt. Could they defy Victor Harrow together? The next morning brought a slender letter, delivered by a trembling footman. Clara recognized her mother's elegant scrawl. With gloved fingers, she untied the fraying twine and unfolded the folded paper. Tears blurred her vision as she read. My dearest Clara, news from town is grim. A rival cattleman whispers of buying our deed at a price we cannot meet, then selling it back to Harrow at a profit. You must beware offers of generous terms. Promise me you'll protect our home, no matter the cost. Father's health weakens with every sunset. I pray your new husband's heart is true to you and to us. Stay safe. Your loving mother, Maria. Clara's hand shook as she pressed the letter to her chest. Her mother's words burned like coals. A rival cattleman plotting to seize the Montoya ranch. The stakes had grown sharper overnight. Victor's men had made their threat. Now a wilderness of schemes threatened her family once more. Clara turned to James, her eyes brimming with tears and resolve. They aim to betray us all, she said, voice trembling yet resolute. We must act. James's expression hardened as he folded his arms in front of the veranda rail. The carved wooden bird from his gift perched between them, silent witness to their shared fate. The sunset behind him bled red across the pastures, as though the land itself was wounded by the cruelty of men. Clara drew in a steadying breath. I won't let my family be crushed again, she vowed. Nor will I stand by while you sacrifice all your dreams. She met his eyes, searching for the spark she had glimpsed in his music. James's hands curled into fists. Clara, we'll face this together, he declared. But tonight we prepare. Tomorrow I'll confront my father, and you must be ready to defend your home with me. Clara nodded, the weight of her mother's letter fueling her courage. As darkness settled over the veranda, the lantern's glow revealed their united silhouettes. Two souls entwined by necessity, hope, and a growing bond forged from hidden music and shared burden. Outside the study window, the horizon quivered with mounted riders racing through the dusk. Harrows or rivals, Clara could not yet tell. Her family's fate galloping closer with every thundering hoofbeat. At first light, Clara Montoya stands in a Harrow ranch's dimly lit study, where antique maps curl at the edges of a sturdy oak table. Slanted beams of dawn filter through high windows, illuminating frayed boundaries inked in faded scars. James Harrow leans close, the harmonica resting atop an old ledger, a symbol of their fledgling alliance. Clara touches its cool metal, and James offers a determined nod. We must act, he says quietly, voice steady. Clara breathes in resolve. Our song will outlast their greed, she replies, her words both promise and challenge. They spread a fresh survey sheet across the table, tracing the Montoya claim's rightful lines. Once, a rival cattleman's name was scrawled over the original mark, inscribing the dispute in permanent ink. Clara's pulse quickens as she notes the acreage her family stands to lose. James points to a cedar symbol near the ridge, Eli Grayson's old survey marker. "We'll prove the original boundaries," he says. Clara meets his gaze, fear and hope entwined. "Then we file our protest," she whispers. Their plan hinges on a single witness and one misplaced stake. By midday, they ride out across wind-scoured plains to a weathered cabin where sun-bleached logs creak on the sky's vast hush. Inside, Eli Grayson paces before a smoldering stove, the town elder's faces etched in deep lines, each wrinkle a ledger of years spent watching land vanish to Harrow's ambition. He pauses, pipe in hand, and offers a nod. "I still have that old deed," he says. "Your father's claim was recorded improperly. Victor Harrow bribed a surveyor, shifted stakes under moonlight." Clara's breath catches. James grips her hand. Eli unrolls a brittle parchment on his workbench. Candlelight glints on its embossed seal. "This is the county record from 1868, he explains. "Montoya land granted with Victor's grandfather's witness, but wrong survey notes. The original cedar marker still stands, and I know its place. Bring proof to the registrar, and we can freeze any sale." He studies their faces. "But you must move fast. The rival cattleman's auction looms next week." Clara's heart pounds as she imagines her parents' relief. James straightens, resolve in every line. "We ride at first light," he says. That evening, they return to the Harrow Ranch in tense silence. The veranda, once warm with promise, now feels like a stage for watchful eyes. In corral, house hands whisper as Victor's men patrol the gate. One of them, a squat foreman with a square jaw, fixes Clara with a cold stare. "Word is you've been meeting that old codger," he warns. "Best leave Harrow affairs to Harrowkin." Clara lifts her chin. "I'm protecting my family's home," she replies evenly. The man smirks, tipping his wide hat. "Your family's home will be ours by Friday." He turns, boots crunching on gravel. Inside the house, James closes the study door behind him. Dust motes drift in the lantern's glow as Clara unclasps the harmonica from her bodice. She raises it to her lips, seeking comfort in its promise of freedom. James steps beside her, rolling back a section of the map. "We've got tomorrow," he says, voice low. "I'll lead the ride to find that cedar." Clara traces the boundary with a fingertip. "I'll stand by you," she promises, conviction firming her spine. In that moment, two unlikely allies become partners in defiance. Night deepens across the ranch, and a low murmur of cattle blends with the distant cry of coyotes. Clara retires to her quarters, mind racing with the stakes ahead. She cannot sleep, haunted by her mother's letter warning of her rival cattleman's schemes. By the lantern's light, she composes a reply, a plea for news and strength to hold the line. She seals it with trembling resolve and entrusts it to a stable hand bound for the Montoya Ranch at dawn. Before the sun rises, James and Clara, armed with Eli's deed and the survey rod, set out under a rose-colored sky. Dust rises around them as their horses pick a path toward the cedar ridge. Clara's heart flutters at every step. The harmonicas wait a reminder of everything at stake. She glances at James, who rides with stooped focus, each measured hoofbeat a vow that he bears her trust. They find the cedar as promised, its trunk worn by seasons yet unwavering. James dismounts, bracing the survey rod against the aged wood. He measures the lines, marking the true boundary in their map. Clara stands guard, eyes scanning for riders, wind whipping strands of hair across her face. When James completes the measurement, he exhales relief. "We have proof," he says. Clara smiles, tears catching the morning light. "Let's head back." Their horses turn toward the distant ranch house, hope mingling with exhaustion. By late afternoon, they return to the study, parchment now annotated with fresh survey notes and the Cedar Stakes coordinates. Clara and James compiled the evidence. Deed, survey, Eli's affidavit. The veranda doors swing open as the ranch hands eye the documents, murmurs rippling through the hall. James clears his throat. "We're filing a formal protest," he announces, voice firm. Clara meets his gaze, pride and relief warming her chest. At least for now, the Montoya land is safe. But victory breeds defiance. At dusk, Victor's men thunder into yard on horseback, dust trailing like a storm at their heels. The same foreman from days before dismounts, tossing his reins to a groom. "Your father demands compliance," he calls, voice echoing across the pens. "Cease this charade or face consequences." Clara stands beside James, unwavering. Victor Harrow's ranch office was a solemn chamber of dark with panels and brass fixtures, the air thick with cigar smoke and authority. A single barred window slanted pale morning light across a heavy oak desk, where ledgers lay stacked like quiet sentinels. Clara Montoya stood beside James Harrow, her fingers brushing the smooth metal of his harmonica case. Behind them, Eli Grayson lingered in the doorway, his weathered face framed by a brimmed hat, pipe clenched between yellowed teeth. The room felt smaller than any barn loft Clara had known, oppressive with decades of Harrow power. Yet within that confined space, she and James carried evidence of truth heavier than any decree. Survey maps signed by the county, Eli's sworn affidavit, and the original deed attested by Cedar Ridge's survey marker. Clara inhaled, steadying her heart. Today they faced Victor Harrow himself, her father-in-law, once a distant face in a crowd of mounted riders, now a man who must reckon with his own recklessness. Victor Harrow sat behind a desk, elbows resting on polished wood. His iron gray hair was slicked back, his gaze narrowing as Eli laid out the aged parchment. "You've called me here under false pretenses," Victor began, voice low but resonant. He reached for a cigar, but paused, his fingers hovering over the matchbox as he regarded Clara. "And you, my daughter," he added, "chose to defy my wishes." Clara's chest tightened, but she raised her chin. "I'm not your pawn," she said, voice clear and unwavering. "You promised marriage would save Montoya Ranch, but you threatened to claim their land regardless." Victor's jaw clenched. He folded his hands and leaned back. "Your father's claim was flawed. You forced my hand." Clara exchanged a glance with James. He stepped forward, harmonica tucked at his belt. "These documents prove the original stake was misplaced by your own surveyor. We have the authority to restore the Montoya's rights." His tone was firm but respectful. Victor snorted. "Legal technicalities will not hold in court." He reached for a ledger bound in cowhide. "Montoya debt is owed to Harrow Holdings. I can call on that debt at any moment." Clara felt panic rise, but she held steady. "We're prepared," she said. "Eli's affidavit and the deed give us 30 days to settle. If you press beyond that, all records become public. I built my strength from the dust they left behind, but I will not watch my parents lose their home." Clara's voice trembled only slightly, enough to betray the weight of her journey. Victor's scarred hands tightened on his desk. The lamplight flickered, throwing his silhouette against the paneled walls. Eli cleared his throat. "With respect, Mr. Harrow, the county registrar will accept these records as evidence. Harrow Holdings stands to gain nothing if this dispute becomes public scandal. Your legacy could be tainted." James added softly, "Father, I cannot support the seizure of Montoya land. I choose truth over tradition." Silence stretched taut as wire. Victor's gaze swung between James and Eli, each bearing witness to his decisions. At last, he exhaled a slow, rumbling sigh. The cigar fell from his hand to the desk, where it smoldered unattended. "So be it," he said. "The Montoyas retain their claim. And you," he addressed James, "have chosen your wife over your birthright. Do not expect leniency from me again." Relief washed over Clara, followed by a surge of affection for James. As Victor swept from the office in a cloud of smoke and unspoken fury, Eli set down his pipe. "Well done," the elder said, voice cracking with pride. "You've secured what was yours all along." Outside, the sun broke fully above the plains, sending golden shafts through the slatted window. Clara pressed her hand over her heart, feeling the room lighten. James closed the heavy door behind them, and they stepped onto the veranda, where house hands paused to watch the outcome. Clara inhaled the fresh breeze, tinged with sage and promise. Later that morning, Clara and James returned to the registrar's office on Halstead Street. James carried the harmonica case under his arm like a badge of change, while Clara clutched the deed now stamped with the county seal. The registrar, a bespectacled woman with soft eyes, reviewed their paperwork before dipping her quill. Each stroke affirmed the Montoya's rightful ownership. When the final flourish dried, Clara tucked the deed into her satchel and turned to James. "We did this together," she whispered. He nodded, a proud gleam in his eyes. "Together," he agreed. That evening, they rode back across the trembling plains, dust rising in soft clouds behind their horses. Clara gazed outward to the horizon, where endless waving grass met a sky stained pink by sunset. She lifted the harmonica, opened its case, and handed it to James. "Our victory deserves a song," she said. He placed it to his lips and coaxed a soft, jubilant melody into the dusk. Each note rang clear over the rolling land, a hymn of freedom and hard-won justice. As the last note settled, Clara dismounted and stood barefoot in the cool grass, dress brushing the earth she had fought to save. James joined her, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. Together, they watched the darkening sky. Two souls unshackled from tradition and fear, bonded by respect and resilience. Clara traced a finger through the grass, whispering, "Our song will outlast their greed." James pressed a kiss to her temple. "And so will we." In the days that followed, the Montoya ranch saw life return to its fields. Clara's parents worked side by side with Harrow ranch hands, repairing fences and planting drought-resistant crops. James often joined them, harmonica tucked in his pocket as a reminder of dreams reclaimed. Under open skies, both families found unexpected harmony, bound by shared effort and newfound respect. Months later, at dawn's gentle light, Clara and James stood atop a low ridge overlooking both ranches. The once disputed cedar marker stood firm between them, symbol of a boundary respected at last. Clara turned to James, voice soft with wonder. "I never imagined I could stand here, so certain of my place in the world." He smiled, brushing back a strand of her hair. "And I never believed I could honor my own heart while upholding my family's name." Together they breathed in the cool morning air, hearts full of promise. Their journey had begun with necessity and hesitation, but it led them to partnership and purpose. The land that once threatened to divide them now united two families under a shared sky, each dawn a testament to courage and conviction. Clara touched the harmonica case at her side and spoke a final, quiet truth. "I built my strength from the dust they left behind." As sunrise gilded the endless plains, they rode down the ridge toward home, ready to chart their future together. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment about what you do next, and subscribe for more Wild West drama tales.